For the second time tomorrow, National Treasury CS Ukur Yatani will deliver the national budget in what is Kenya's biggest budget yet. But in a classical case of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, the government is set to borrow to repay those it had borrowed from. Tonight we are counting the cost for you, the viewer. But first, these are the stories making headlines tonight. Tonight, National Treasury CS Ukur Yatani is set to deliver his second national budget tomorrow for the financial year 2020-2021 amid calls for reduction of taxes and acceleration in ease of doing business. President Uhuru Kenyatta leads the nation in the destruction of 5,000 illegal firearms as well as obsolete state-owned small arms and light weapons. Plus, politicians join the debate on third-term school fee balance, faulting Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha for ordering parents to pay the balance. And a family of a 72-year-old woman thrown into confusion and grief after her body was exhumed and taken away by unknown people in Kilifi County. Chris Onyango is our sign language interpreter. Good evening, I'm Abubakar Abdullahi. Welcome to the broadcast. Tonight, a section of members of parliament have told off Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha over his recent remark on payment of school fees. The leaders say that a majority of parents are not in a position to pay school fees after some lost their jobs and others are receiving half of their salaries due to the effect of COVID-19. However, the CS maintains that there are parents who are in a position to pay school fees but are simply refusing to do so.
La kusikitisha Bwana Spika, Waziri wa Elimu juzi ametoa amri kwa walimu wakuu wa shule hizi kufukuza wanafunzi ambao wana deni la karo. Bwana Spika, hakuacha hapo, lakini alidai ya kwa wazazi hawalipi karo kusudi licha ya kuwa wana uwezo. Bwana Spika, matamshi haya ambao ni ya kusikitisha, ya kushangaza na ya kukemewa yamezua utata kuhusu mpangilio wa kuhakikisha asilimia 100 ya wanafunzi wanaweza kuingia shule za upili. Wazazi kwa sasa, Bwana Spika, wana shida, haswa sasa uchumi umeweza kuzoroteka na mambo ya corona. Pesa za CDF, Bwana Spika, ambazo zafaa kusaidia kulipia karo hazijatoka zipasavyo. Hawa wazazi na wanafunzi, Bwana Spika, watasaidika vipi? Hizi kauli za waziri ni msimamo wa serikali ama ni kauli yake mwenyewe ya kibinafsi? Na tatu, lini waziri atarekebisha kauli yake na kuomba Wakenya msamaha?
Ukichukua kwa constituency kama yangu, Embakasi South constituency, ama watoto wangu wa Mukuru, wazazi wao wengi wanafanya kazi industrial area, wamesimamishwa kazi tangu March mwaka jana. Wazazi hawana mapato, na alafu kama wazazi hawana mapato, unakuja unaambia walimu wafukuzi watoto waende nyumbani. Wafukuzi watoto waende nyumbani wapi?
We want to urge Magoha to direct government officers, principals not to send students out of schools, because even if they go out of schools, they will not get the money. There's no money. So I think this is one of the most insensitive statements that has come from a government officer, a senior government officer, and we caution him that we are going to invoke our powers to deal with him.
So those who can afford to pay must pay. They have to pay. All these politics, you forget about it. And I said you pay the fee balances. Any teacher who is doing an additional levy, treat that as a criminal act.
Elsewhere, President Uhuru Kenyatta presided over the banning of 5,144 illegal firearms as well as obsolete state-owned small farms and light weapons at an event that was held in Ngong, Kajiado County. The exercise, which aims at ending inter-clan conflict among livestock keeping communities and strengthening security, will also offer job opportunities to makers of homemade firearms at small weapons facility in Ruiru, President Uhuru Kenyatta has said. He, however, warned leaders who tolerate inter-clan conflict, saying harsh actions will be taken against them.
In 2 years alone, we are destroying over 14,000 firearms that are in illegal hands. Again, as I said, it's evidence that the reforms in the security sector are working. A lot of this work has been done in collaboration with several development partners who have worked very closely with us, including the UN and UNDP, and bilateral agencies with whom we have agreements.
Today, we put an additional fire of freedom to secure the values that we all hold so deeply and we cherish and affirm, as we also, through the same fire, retire from circulation obsolete, state-owned small arms and light weapons that are now redundant to our nation's defense and security, but also as we destroy homemade guns that have been used to threaten the lives of our people.
Moving on, residents of Mwangaza area in Isiolo town are living in fear after a night's raid in one homestead where 2 people were left with gunshot wounds while attackers fled with over 80 goats. And as Andrin Kilemi now reports, police have so far recovered 42 out of the 87 goats that were stolen.
Tension is high in Mwangaza area of Isiolo County following a night raid which left 2 people nursing gunshot injuries. According to residents, the gunmen descended on Peter Muriongi's homestead at around 11:30 p.m., shooting a 35-year-old man and a 15-year-old boy as they made away with over 80 goats, leaving behind cows that were in the same homestead.
Nilisikia bunduki, nikasikia ni kama nyumba imegongwa na mawe, lakini nikiwa nimekaakaa hivi tu nikapigiwa simu, nikaambiwa amka, kwenu kumevamiwa. Sasa mimi nilikuwa nafikiria hata ni hoteli kwa sababu mimi niko na hoteli hapa.
Led by Mwangaza C area manager Purity Nkadha, the locals noted that crime incidents were on the increase during curfew time when members of the public are restricted to stay indoors.
Tumepata kushangaa kwa sababu hiyo ni masaa kukwe usiku sana. Hata watu walikuwa natembea kwa barabara na hata si watu wengi walikuwa wamelala. Sasa upande wa security hapa kwetu imekuwa mbaya kwa sababu hata ya hao watu wana pickpocket.
Isiolo County Commissioner Herman Shambi said police have already recovered 42 out of the 87 stolen goats. He said that detectives have crucial leads that will help nab the criminals.
We suspect those raiders are from the Turkana community kwa sababu sahihi nyao imetupeleka mpaka Eremet. Na tumegundua tayari wamegawanya hiyo mali kwa mafungu mawili, lakini nataka kuhakikisha ya kwamba zile jitihada tumeweka, hizo mbuzi zitapatikana na hao waizi watapatikana, kwa sababu tuko mpaka na mbwa kunusa, lakini kuna mengine siwezi sema hapa because I think we have the lead. Ile mtu ambaye alifanya maneno, ambaye alifanya kile kitendo ni mtu anajua hiyo mji vizuri sana, na labda kuna information nimepata vizuri, labda alikuwa hata hapo wakati mwingine, labda kwa sababu hata vile ukiingia kuruka ni mtu ambaye alikuwa anajua.
Shambi called upon members of the public to always cooperate with security officers in ensuring security is beefed up in the area. Andrin Kilemi, TV 47.
Moving on, Tekra Mungai's inquest will be heard in camera for witnesses from Lamu. Milimani Principal Magistrate Zainab Abdul has ruled that the application by the prosecution was merited on the security of the witnesses who come from Lamu. In an oral application, the prosecution sought to have the case heard in closed doors, citing the security of the witnesses being at risk. The court heard that 3 witnesses were present in court and ready to testify. There were 2 nurses and Tekra's friend, Omar Lali, who is likely to be the witness, was not present in court, but his lawyer was in court. Tekra Keroche Brewery's boss, Tabitha Karanja's daughter, died on May the 2nd last year at a Nairobi hospital after she allegedly fell down stairs at a house in Lamu.
If their names and faces are here.
I have considered the application by the prosecution. There is need to safeguard the identity of the witnesses who are present from Lamu. Their concerns are merited. Therefore, the proceedings for today shall be held in camera. Those are the orders of the court. By the prosecutor.
We don't have an objection to the application. I'm also informed that Lamu is a very small community, particularly where these particular witnesses operate from.
While you're watching TV 47 News tonight, keep talking to us. Remember, our special coverage tonight is on the budget, which Treasury CS Ukuri Yatani will read in Parliament tomorrow. That budget being the biggest in Kenya's history, accounting for 3.6 trillion shillings estimate. Of course, that in comparison to the 2020-2021 budget, which was 2.91 trillion shillings. The 2019-2020 budget was at 1.83, the biggest. But where is the money coming from? Tonight we are counting the cost for you. Time for us to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be back with more after this break.
Global Precast Panels, we have the best quality, durable and affordable precast panels to suit all your needs. Manufactured under a controlled environment, we have the best precast concrete panels, precast concrete floor slabs, precast concrete perimeter wall, precast concrete columns and beams. Our panels reduce construction cost by up to 40% with absolutely no plaster required, including added soundproof benefits. Convenient for story buildings, schools, offices, residential houses, hospitals, and warehouses. Take advantage of our free transport. Contact us on 0702 24 7267 or 0796 24 7267. Global Precast Panels Limited, your reliable option for efficient construction.
These are the sights and sounds of a working nation. There are no shortages to remarkable ideas. What's missing is the will to execute them.
You need to stay relevant. If you don't, you're going to fade off.
Yes, they are a dime in a dozen, but the real meat on these bones comes from trying to realize them.
You just need to perfect anything. If it's drawing, if it's music, pursue it 100% because it's something that is giving back.
Join me, Violet Njoki, as I tell you the stories of these executed ideas, because yours could be next. Mondays, 7:30 p.m.
Hey, now that's hitting the right notes. When life gets boring, we bring out our play. You see, playfulness is in our DNA. It's in the way we move and laugh. It's in the way we walk, the way we rock, and how we just don't stop. You feel me? We add color to everything, to every day and every dish, because the world needs our crazy. With the different flavors that make
TV 47, the home of untold stories.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. The National Treasury CS is set to read the 2021-2022 budget tomorrow on Thursday. This budget is termed to be Kenya's largest budget in history. In the estimates, the National Treasury has allocated 15.4 billion shillings for COVID-19 interventions and post-COVID-19 stimulus package of 26.6 billion shillings. And as Josh Onsare reports, the Ministry of Health, Defense and Infrastructure continue to get the mega share of the national pie.
The 2021-2022 financial year budget is one of the biggest national expenditure plan in Kenya's history. As the country struggles to fix the economy amid COVID-19, in the estimated budget of 3.66 trillion shillings expected to be read on Thursday in Parliament, the Treasury has allocated 15.4 billion shillings for COVID-19 interventions and post-COVID stimulus package of 26.6 billion shillings to cushion the affected businesses. In the 2021-2022 budget estimates, the Ministry of Health at the national level is allocated 121 billion shillings, Defense 119.8 billion shillings, Water, Sanitation and Irrigation 77.4 billion shillings, Foreign Affairs 18.8 billion shillings and Youth Affairs 5.6 billion shillings. The National Assembly Budget and Appropriation Committee suggested the allocation to public universities needs to be increased from the current 41 to 61 billion shillings and 2.5 billion shillings in the private universities to 5.6 billion shillings to run their operations effectively. Josh Onsare, TV47, Nairobi.
Now, to fund the 3.6 trillion budget, the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury, Ukuru Yatani, has proposed a raft of measures to raise the deficit, which includes review of value-added tax on some items as well as the review of excise duty. Top on Yatani's list is the reintroduction of excess duty on betting and change of the duty rates on motorcycle. Mwangi Maina has that report.
The National Treasury has proposed to amend the rate of excise duty on motorcycles from 11,608 Kenya shillings per motorcycle to 15% of the excisable value. This means that excise duty for motorcycles will change from a specific rate to ad valorem, meaning that motorcycles will be taxable depending on their value. Importers, local assemblers and consumers will bear the burden of this tax. The increase of this excise duty on borders which employ more than 1.5 million youths directly has been castigated by riders who fear that high motorcycle prices will lock many youths out of this lucrative venture.
Unapoangalia vijana wengi hawataweza kufaulu kuweza kukuwa na hizi pikipiki. Na tunapoangalia kwamba hata imechangia mambo ya wizi ya pikipiki imeanza kuongezeka haswa hapa Bungoma. Kwa hivyo tunamuomba rais wetu mambo ya tax ambayo ameweza kuweka katika pikipiki akaweze kuiondoa ili ikaweze kufanya vijana wakachukue pikipiki iwe ni ajira katika vijana wetu na vijana wetu wakaweze kupata kazi.
Pikipiki ni bei ghali, ukienda kwa kashi unakupewa ni 120 ni sawa 100. Naya 125 nayo ni 140. Hata watu wenye nini tuna pesa tutaenda wapi? Sasa tunaomba serikali tusaidie. Loni imefanya hata pesa hapa town hakuna. Sababu hata loni nao wajua kama pesa hakuna town. Pesa gani nayo karibu wiki moja mwezi moja wanasema na kutembelea. Na wao ukisema kwenyewe ni nje ni mbaya hawasikii. Wanataka haki yao.
According to Deloitte, a tax advisory and consulting firm, the value of a motorcycle that would give rise to excise duty of Kenya shillings 11,600, where an ad valorem rate of 15% is applied, would be Kenya shillings 77,300. This implies that excise duty on a motorcycle of a value exceeding 77,000 Kenya shillings would be higher if a rate of 15% is applied as compared to the current specific rate. Bungoma boda boda riders say that a majority of them are still servicing loans and might end up losing their motorcycles to their lenders. They claim their returns have been diminishing out of an increase in the number of motorcycles, high fuel prices, and reacquisition of their motorcycles. They opine that an increase in excise duty spells doom to this sector as the government moves in to raise more taxes.
Kwa hivyo mimi kama mimi mwanapotapota na niko na loan, pikipiki yenye naendesha ni ya loan. Kwa wiki inafaa nilipe 3,868. Na iwapo mafuta imepanda imefika kiwango ile, je, hata hii kampuni yenye na inatupea pikipiki inafaa waangalie ndani?
Loan itakui kama wao wajuangi. Bora siku yenye umeajiria upate hiyo pesa watumie wao wajali, umepata wapi pesa ama ukiwapigia simu wao wajali, utafanya chochote ufanye nini? Wajao unataka pesa yao.
Even if the rates of hiyo uchumi imepanda, lakini pia wasionee sana watu wa pikipiki.
Other tax measures that have been introduced is the reintroduction of excise duty on locally manufactured sugar confectionery and chocolate. The bill also proposes to reintroduce excise duty on betting, where stakers will be taxed 20% of the amount waged or staked. The finance bill also proposes to introduce excise duty on jewelry, where importers, local manufacturers, and consumers will be taxed at the rate of 10%. Also in the bill is the introduction of excise duty on products containing nicotine or nicotine substitutes, where importers and local manufacturers will be taxed at the rate of 5,000 Kenya shillings per kilogram for products intended for inhalation without combustion or oral application. Mwangi Maina, TV47, Nairobi.
Thank you, Mwangi Maina, for breaking down the numbers that so matter every year at such a time and for the next 1 year. Let's now count the cost. Our guest tonight is Professor XN Iraqi, Associate Professor, the University of Nairobi. Good evening, Professor, and thank you for making time for us tonight.
Good evening, Kenyans.
All right, Professor, 3.6 trillion shillings, the largest budget in Kenya's history. Your reaction first.
I am surprised that we can claim this is the biggest budget in Kenya's history.
Yet.
Because even next year the budget will be bigger than this year. So if you look at our economy, the population is increasing from year to year. So by expectation, we expect a higher demand for goods and services. We expect inflation to keep on going up. So by logical reasoning, every budget every year will always be bigger than the previous year. So we should not be very surprised by that.
All right, and that partly explains the comparison in the last 3 financial years. If you look at 2020-2021 budget, which was 2.91 trillion, 2019-2020, which was 1.38. Prof, we are talking of these being the biggest budget yet, because just breaking down the numbers, this is the equivalence of the government spending close to 10 billion shillings in a day for the next 365 days.
That is a lot of money. My biggest concern about this budget is not so much the size or the amount, but 2 things. Where will you get the money from? And what are you going to spend it on? And more importantly, amid COVID-19 pandemic. I think those are the 3 issues that are concerning me most, even more than the amount. And I don't envy the Minister of Finance or the Cabinet Secretary because he has to perform a very balancing act. Remember, when we have COVID-19, that means less income for you and me and for businesses. But the government still needs money for expenditure and for projects. So on one hand here, you want more money. On one hand here, you have people who have no money. So it's going to be a very interesting balancing act. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow's budget and see how he is going to balance that.
All right, Prof, we will shortly talk of where that money, in reference to the amount that has been allocated in this budget, is coming from. But if this was a household, let's leave the country and the macroeconomics. If this is a household and 70% of the provider, the breadwinner's salary is getting to service debt, that is indicative of poor economics at best.
I don't think it is indicative of poor economics. It is indicative of reality. I don't know when you last got a border or a taxi lately. One of the things I've noted is those young men don't know to be paid using M-Pesa. And you ask them why, they tell you, nimefuriza, I've freezed. So even at individual level, we have all borrowed a lot. So it's not just the government that has borrowed, also individuals have borrowed. And the question I've been asking all the time is, why do we get concerned when the government borrows money, yet we borrow the money, corporations borrow the money, we all borrow the money. I think what we should be worried about is not the borrowing, but what we put that money into. As long as that money is used to increase the productive capacity of this country, I'm okay with debt. The problem is when you borrow money as an individual to buy mandazi or to get a second wife. But you use it to invest in a house, in the future of your education or your children's education. I have no problem with that.
And given where much of this money has gone to in as far as the government investments are concerned, is that a bad idea? Is it the equivalence of marrying a second wife?
I don't think so. Because if you look at where the money is going, one, is going on the recurrent expenditure, paying salaries and wages. And I think that's the problem I have. A lot of money goes to the current expenditure, and not enough of it is going to projects that are going to increase the productive capacity of this country. So in the long run, I want to see a rebalance, where more money goes to development as opposed to going to the current expenditure.
Prof, will I be wrong to say, if as a layman, of course not an economist, as a journalist, if I'm to look at the numbers and what is supposed to be paid to who and where that money is to come from, is this the classical case of borrowing from Peter to Paul, borrowing from one to pay the other?
I would not make it that simplistic.
Is it?
Because if you're in government, where would you get money from? In any economy or in any situation, there are always people who have excess money. And there are always people who have less money. So that is what we do all the time. You get money with those who have to pay those, or to get to those who don't have. Even banks themselves do that all the time. You go and save the money because you have excess money. Somebody else comes and borrows that money. The government is simply doing that on a large scale. And I would want you to give me another option the government have, instead of borrowing from Paul to pay Peter. I think as long as that money is put into good use, that is still good economics.
All right, Prof. And talking of the money, as far as the trillions of shillings involved are concerned, where is the money coming from? 3.6 trillion shillings is the budget for this year, for the financial year 2021-2022.
I'm sure that is a question CS Utani is also asking. Where would the 3.6 trillion come from? I see basically three sources. One of them is you tax Kenyans, which is a problem because with COVID-19, we have less taxes, whether it is excise duty, whether it is VAT, whether it is income tax, they are all going down. Number two, you get money from borrowing. You can either borrow externally or you can borrow internally. And Kenyans are complaining about too much borrowing, that we are borrowing more than we can be able to pay, and that's probably reflected in the amount of money that we are putting into servicing debts. And of course, the third source is donors. Some countries or some donors give us some money, which we can use to finance our budget. Unfortunately, when you look at those numbers, we always find that we have less revenue compared with the expenditure. So we have a budget deficit, and that's why borrowing becomes almost inevitable. So the government needs to balance those resources. Although there's a fourth one that we can use, not much talked about. We can reduce the waste, or we can even reduce the corruption, so that we don't need as much money as we need now. Balancing all those four sources is not easy, because some politics is always involved. But it's not rocket science, it is possible.
All right, and you hint of and talk of corruption, Prof. We will come to that. I understand we need to take a short break, but this discussion will continue right after this break. Stay with us.
At Global Precast Panels. We have the best quality, durable and affordable precast panels to suit all your needs. Manufactured under a controlled environment, we have the best precast concrete panels, precast concrete floor slabs, precast concrete perimeter wall, precast concrete columns and beams. Our panels reduce construction cost by up to 40% with absolutely no plaster required, including added soundproof benefits. Convenient for story buildings, schools, offices, residential houses, hospitals, and warehouses. Take advantage of our free transport. Contact us on 0702 24 7267 or 0796 24 7267. Global Precast Panels Limited, your reliable option for efficient construction.
These are the sights and sounds of a working nation. There are no shortages to remarkable ideas. What's missing is the will to execute them.
You need to stay relevant. If you don't, you're going to fade off.
Yes, they are a dime in a dozen, but the real meat on these bones comes from trying to realize them.
You just need to perfect anything. If it's drawing, if it's music, pursue it 100% because it's something that is giving back.
Join me, Violet Njoki, as I tell you the stories of these executed ideas, because yours could be next. Mondays, 7:30 p.m.
Hey, now that's hitting the right notes. When life gets boring, we bring out our play. You see, playfulness is in our DNA. It's in the way we move and laugh. It's in the way we walk, the way we rock, and how we just don't stop. You feel me? We add color to everything, to every day and every dish, because the world needs our crazy. We're the different flavors that make life more exciting. We're the ones who add color to every moment. Fanta, color every moment.
Well, the speaker is neither here nor there.
I should have done my outro from here.
Yes, no.
And we're just like that. I look beautiful.
Tune in to Morning Cafe, Mondays to Fridays from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. with me, Linda Alela, only on TV47, the home of Untold Stories.
Raukia siku njema na tunukiwa offers kila siku. Pata offers zote mahali pamoja ili uongeze zaidi, utume SMS zaidi na ubrowse zaidi.
Wewe usijali. Tuma namba ya kila supplier kwa hiyo soko. Ndio vile nitaongea na kila mmoja wao.
Very good. Piga *444 hash utunukiwe Credo double.
Raukia siku njema na tunukiwa offers kila siku.
A show with a unique perspective as to the property industry right here in Kenya. Not only showing you the properties available, but also showing you how you can improve the ambience, look and feel of your living and working spaces.
Yes.
Wow.
This is our office.
This is amazing.
Currently we have a lot of design ideas.
Ranging from your sitting areas, dining areas.
You are watching TV47, the home of Untold Stories.
Welcome back to TV47 News Tonight. Thank you for staying with us. Remember, tonight we are breaking down the numbers in as far as the national budget is concerned. Our guest in studio with me, as earlier introduced, is Professor XN Iraqi, Associate Professor, University of Nairobi. And also joining us now is Dr. David Kabata, a lecturer at the Kirinyaga University. Let me engage Professor XN. Prof, before we went for a break, we were talking of deficit. I'm just looking at the numbers. During the financial year of 2009-2010, Kenya's then fiscal deficit was 163 billion shillings. In the financial year 2020-2021, we are talking of 957 billion shillings. What is that indicative of, Prof?
I'm not very surprised that the budget deficit has gone up in the last almost 10 years. One reason is a bit of inflation, but number two is that the population has gone up. So there's more demands for goods and services. And more importantly, a lot of projects have come up in those 10 years or so. Remember, we didn't have Ram Port, we didn't have SGR, we didn't have the port of Mombasa, and a lot of roads that have been constructed. So because of the demand for goods and services in those 10 years or so, the budget deficit had to go up. In the same period, I don't think the tax revenues have gone up substantially to cover the difference between the demand and the supply of the money. So that's not very surprising. We expected that.
All right, let me bring in Dr. David Kabata to the discussion, lecturer, Kirinyaga University. Good evening, Dr. Ari, and thank you for your time as well. Let me get first your initial reaction to the 3.6 trillion record shilling budget.
So thank you very much. I'm trying to be a bit innovative. I'm in a blackout. Therefore, I'm using my car as a source of light. But allow me to say that the 3.6 trillion budget, the whole issue is not about the 3.6 trillion budget, but how we are going to fund that budget. I think that is the most important thing, because the issue is, where are we going to get the money which we can use to fund some of those areas that is making the government or the people who came up to have such a big budget. So for me, the issue is never about the estimate, but how we can be able to fund them.
All right, and talking of how the government can be able to finance that budget, there is a projected revenue of 2 trillion shillings. Understanding the unique circumstances of COVID-19 and the economic environment, is this an ambitious 2.04 trillion shillings revenue projected?
Yes. I think they were very ambitious, and they will have to be really innovative for them to be able to get that money. Basically because of some of the challenges that we have had, one of them being the COVID-19. If you look at what COVID-19 has done to many of the businesses, is that it has either disrupted the value creation system or the value delivery system, how that value is delivered to the customers. And therefore, our businesses, most of our businesses from SMEs and also the big businesses are not working to their optimal. And therefore, we have some sectors that have really been hit by the COVID-19. I'll give an example of the hospitality and also the tourism sector, where the government collects about 1.5 or 145 billion to 160 billion. If you look at that sector, the government cannot be able to collect as much as it has been collecting, and therefore, for us to be able to collect 2 trillion, especially when it comes to taxation and many other areas that they are talking about, it needs a lot of innovation in the side of the government.
All right, let me ask the same question and pose it to Professor XN, who is with me in studio. Prof, a projected revenue of 2 trillion shillings, is it realistic?
If you look at the amount that KRA has been correcting in the last few years, is always below the expectations. So I don't think this year we are going to correct as much money as expected, particularly amid COVID-19. But my hunch tells me that we can be innovative and correct a lot of money or tax revenues. Well, one of the issues I've raised repeatedly, but not many people might agree with me, is instead of raising the tax rate, we should reduce the tax rate. And surprisingly, you might get more taxes. If you get a tax rate of 16% and compare the tax you are going to raise compared with a tax rate of 12% or 11%, you might actually find that you are going to raise more taxes at 11% or 12%. Because there will be more compliance. It will be easier to correct. And once you give people a tax cut, they tend to spend more. Or if you reduce the tax rate, people spend more. So that's one innovative way I believe that the government can use to raise more taxes. It appears counterintuitive, but my hunch tells me it can work. It has been tried. If you look at the US,
and Prof, you say it can work because it partly worked with, I remember Margaret Thatcher economics, the Reaganomics.
Yes, the Reaganomics. So the other big advantage of cutting the tax rate is that it acts as a stimulus package, or it acts as a stimulus. So when people have money they spend it, they don't keep it in their pocket, they spend it. And if you look at the way an economy develops, you either spend the money consumption or you invest. So if you cut the taxes, people are going to use that money to invest, and that is going to make the economy vibrant and make the economy grow. There will be demands for goods and services. And I believe that's one way we can try. If we have not tried it, we should not say it won't work. Why can't we try it?
All right, Prof. And still looking at the 3.6 trillion shillings budget, there's the recurrent expenditure of 1.29 trillion shillings, which again brings up the question of the amount collected versus the spending. Prof?
I thought we argued earlier that the amount collected and the spending are disproportionate. We spend more than we collect, and that's why we are getting the budget deficit, which we have to fund through borrowing, or hopefully through donors, or reducing some of the services that we've been offering, maybe living within our means. That's very hard to do for political reasons. If you have to reduce the services that we offer as a government, one of the most expensive ones, remember, is salaries and wages. It means you send some people home. No politicians would want to do that, whether at the county level or the national level. So I see the government continuing to borrow to bridge the budget deficit in the foreseeable future.
And Prof, we have talked of tax. Looking at the structure of Kenya's debt, the classification is often three of them: multilateral, bilateral, and commercial. If you compare the last decade, the multilateral has relatively remained at 33%, bilateral an increase of 3%, but the government seemingly has seen an increase in commercial borrowing from 4% in 2010 to 34% in 2020. What explains that, Prof?
What I suspect is commercial borrowing is sometimes easier to come up with, because most of that commercial borrowing is done internally. So if you want to borrow money from one of the Kenyan big banks, one of the Kenyan small banks, it's much easier. If you have to borrow abroad, you have to go through the negotiations, long protracted negotiations, you have to come up with contracts and so on. So I think the ease of getting commercial loans is probably what is attracting the government to that area. Unfortunately, they are usually more expensive, and more importantly, the government competes with the local investors like you and me, leading to some crowding out effect. So what I would expect in future is to see a bigger balance between commercial lending and what we are calling concessional or multilateral borrowing, which is much cheaper in the long run.
All right, remember you as a viewer can be part of this discussion. Talk to us, send us a message on 22047. The hashtag to use is TV47News. We are counting the costs, breaking down the numbers for you. And Prof, as we finalize, we have talked of trillions of shillings. We are talking of billions of shillings. We are talking of the biggest budget in this region. Prof, to a Kenyan who is watching this and probably wondering what is in for me in this budget, what will your answer be?
That's a good and interesting question, because the budget is not selective. It is for everybody. Whether you are Wanjiko, whether you're in the counties, whether you are in the rural areas, there's always something for you in the budget. And it is there in two ways. One, in terms of paying taxes, being a contributor to the revenue, or being a beneficiary of the taxes that have been collected. So what we are hoping is that the way the budget is going to be read tomorrow is that it will be balanced in terms of who pays the taxes and in terms of who benefits from the taxes. I'm hoping that when I read the budget tomorrow, I will see people in the counties smiling, people in the slums smiling, people on the streets smiling, people in the leafy suburbs smiling, women smiling, and men smiling. So should be a very balanced budget. But unfortunately, we won't see those details until it is read for us. I'll be very alert tomorrow to see what is there for all of us, including myself.
All right, Prof, and talking of the expenditure and where this money often goes to, there is a presidential admission that at least 2 billion shillings is lost in this country every day. If Kenya was to put to proper use that amount of money, we are talking of an economic reform, are we?
I don't think that will be an economic reform. It will be an economic magic.
Magic?
Magic, it will be a magic, because if you multiply 365 multiplied by 2, that is a whole 700 billion Kenyan shillings. That is probably, if you get a budget of 3.6 trillion and you get 700 over that, that is probably a very huge percentage. If you look at the budget deficit, it's about 950 billion. And if you save that money, 700,000 or 700 million, we are almost covering the budget, or not the budget deficit. That's why I'm saying that would be a miracle. And I wish we can do all that. I wish the president and the government can do all that they can to make sure that that money is not stolen or wherever it goes. That will be a transformation of our economy. Can you imagine Kenyan talking of no more budget deficit? It will be a miracle, because we haven't had one for a long time.
And not because there is no need to borrow, but because the money is put to proper use.
Yes.
All right, Professor, that's where we'll have to end this discussion. Thank you for making time for us tonight, Prof.
Thank you also.
Professor XN Iraki is an associate professor at the University of Nairobi. Let's continue with more news, and with a couple of hours left before the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and National Planning, Ukur Yatani, breaks down to the public the country's spending and tax measures for the new financial year 2021-2022. The common mwananchi will be looking forward to favorable tax measures, especially on basic commodities. Daniel Masidza visited Kibra in Nairobi and engaged a couple on their expectations regarding the budget reading on Thursday afternoon.
When Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani takes the short walk from the National Treasury building along Rambe Avenue to Parliament buildings on Thursday afternoon to break down his last full budget of 3.6 trillion Kenya shillings to the public, the common mwananchi is looking forward to a reduction or zero rating of basic commodities. For Joseph Baraza and his wife Alice Emali, life hasn't been easy since the first case of COVID-19 was reported in the country in March 2020, coupled with the high inflation. As they welcome me for a cup of tea in their one-roomed house in Kibra, behind their warm welcome lay worried souls. For them, the current high cost of living is unbearable, and something must be done quickly to salvage their dwindling hopes.
Mwaka jana corona ingie Machi, imekuwa changamoto mingi, biashara imerudi chini, hii jua kali, alafu pesa hakuna, vitu kama hizo zimetupeleka maisha imekuwa chini. Hizo ni changamoto zenye tumekuwa nazo mwaka hii. Mwaka chumi jarudi mzuri. Sasa budget yenye inaenda kusoma na ile kulinganisha na ile mwaka hiyo ingine, hiyo hata tuchapata ijatusaidia.
Mafuta kupika iko juu, hata saa hii ukienda ununue unashindwa utanunua ama utaacha ama uchemshe tu mboga na chumvi hivyo. Kwa mfano hapo nyuma tulikuwa tunanunua kama lita ilikuanga 150. Sasa ni 200. Sasa hata utashindwa utanunua hiyo 200 itatoka wapi? Na kazi hakuna, naona kibaro ninakaa kwa nyumba.
As they await the budget on Thursday afternoon, favorable taxation measures tops their list of priorities, which they say will resuscitate their battered vision of financial independence.
Imepanda petroli, hiyo ndio imechangia warudishe chini ya mafuta ya mboga, sukari. Alafu sasa unajua mwananchi wa kawaida kama saa hii kupata hata kibarua imekuwa ngumu. Saa hii tuko juu ya mawe. Ukipata 100 hata haiwezi fika. Ningependa kumwambia kama ni waziri ama rais, changamoto watu wako nayo chini, raia wa kawaida kama sisi ni kazi hakuna, pesa iko kidogo, biashara imerudi chini, jua kali mara inapatikana mara haipatikani, vitu kwa juu. Sasa hiyo ndio vitu angejaribu kutusaidia watu wa chini.
Hapo upande wa bidhaa kupanda, vitu kupanda kama mafuta, sukari, haya mkate yenye tulinuanga hata 25 saa hii ilipanda. Ajaribu kushukisha.
The 2021-2022 fiscal year will begin on the 1st of July 2021 and come to a close on the 30th of June 2022, with Kenya Revenue Authority expected to collect only 1.8 trillion Kenya shillings in taxation, leaving a huge budget deficit to be filled through borrowing.
As you have heard from Alice and Joseph, what Kenyans need is more jobs, more money in their pocket. Reporting for TV47, Budget Watch 2021-2022, I am Daniel Masiza.
Thank you, Daniel Masiza, for that report. Remember, tomorrow we will be covering for you a special breakdown again of the budget, the numbers involved and how they are affecting you, amplifying your voice before, after and during the presentation of the budget. Remember, this is Kenya's largest budget at 3.6 trillion shillings, surpassing the 2.91 trillion shillings of the 2019-2020 budget and 1.83 trillion shillings of the 2019-2020 budget. You can always count on us in as far as that breakdown of the numbers is concerned. From numbers, let's get to the world of sports. Dennis Otieno is with us. Dennis, good evening. Are there numbers from the world of sports in terms of points tonight?
Good evening to you too, Abubakar Abdullahi. Like you've said, numbers involved in sports. That is what sports is all about, results. Now, of course, tonight we will be telling you about the results registered in the FKF Cup. We shall also be telling you about a farewell bid to fallen rugby legend Benjamin Ayimba. Also, some athletics action that took shape earlier today at the Nyayo National Stadium. Now, this and more coming up.